Welcome to TB Dahl Audiobooks. Before the story begins, please take a quick second to subscribe and leave a comment below. Your support keeps these stories alive. Now, enjoy the listen.
But the running is done. Whatever comes next, the investigation, the media, the political noise, we face it standing still. Riley set the mug on the table. Volkov will adapt. The denial shifts to targeted discrediting. He'll try to separate the bloodline evidence from the criminal evidence and argue they're unrelated. He'll claim the vault was a private collection, the kidnapping was a misunderstanding, and the murder was unconnected. Let him try. He left too many fingerprints. Not literal ones. No, but the kind that matter. A pattern that only exists if someone was coordinating across countries, across institutions, across timelines. That's the print. You can't make it disappear by denying any single element, because the whole shape tells the story. Riley looked at her brother. His hands rested on the atlas, steady and roughened. The same hands that had cut padlocks, carried emergency bags, and pulled Tara from a locked room. The hands of someone who built things, and when necessary, broke them. "We didn't claim power," she said. "We didn't ask for thrones or titles or recognition. No, we asked for the truth, and we took it." Elliot met her eyes, the pale blue-grey of his irises, so different from her hazel, yet carrying the same inherited architecture of brow and jaw and stubborn mouth. So now what? Riley picked up her phone. One new message from Maren. The Dutch consortium's statement had been picked up by 43 international outlets. 2 messages from numbers she didn't recognize, which she left unread. One from Broch confirming the interview with Nordahl at 9 a.m. Outside, Oslo's afternoon rain had stopped. Weak October sunlight pressed through the cloud cover and laid a pale strip across the kitchen floor. Now we walk into a police station tomorrow and tell the truth. All of it. Everything we know, everything we found, everything that was done to us and to the people who tried to help us. And after that? After that, it belongs to the law, the press, and the public record. Not to Volkov, not to Sokolov, not to honest Russia, not to us. Elliot nodded. He folded the atlas closed and placed it beside his chair. The routes, the safe houses, the escape plans, infrastructure built for a crisis that had changed form. The hiding was over. The evidence was in the light. Volkov could still move. There were assets to recall, proxies to sacrifice, narratives to bend. Somewhere in Moscow, a colonel with pale grey eyes was recalculating the cost of suppression against the cost of exposure, and finding the arithmetic had shifted beneath his feet. But that was his problem now. Riley washed her mug and set it on the rack. Elliot checked the locks. They sat in the quiet kitchen of a borrowed apartment in Rodaluka, 2 people who had entered the world as Sophia and Mikhail and grown up as strangers and found each other in a basement beside a dead man and survived everything that came after. The story was no longer hidden. Their names, all 4 of them, belonged to the record now. The first police car arrived at the Norse Secure Solutions facility on Alnabru at 8:14 a.m., 47 minutes after Maren Lunde's article went live. By 8:31, 3 more units had blocked the access road. A PST tactical team entered the building from the south loading bay at 8:52, passing through the same maintenance corridor Riley and Elliot had used 9 hours earlier. The reinforced basement vault stood open, its contents undisturbed except for the gaps where originals had already been photographed. Karin Nordahl stood in the rain outside the perimeter line and watched the tactical officers emerge carrying evidence crates. She had not slept. The case she'd been assigned 2 weeks ago, a suspicious death in a museum basement, 2 witnesses with matching envelopes, had detonated into something that involved 3 countries, a secret organization, a kidnapping, forged documents, and the Russian embassy issuing contradictory statements before breakfast. Her phone rang. Deputy Commissioner Burge. "Tell me the building is secured." Building secured. Vault contents intact. PST has primary control of the site. The woman. Tara Morgan was removed from a locked room on sub-level 2 at 9:48 last night by Riley Hunt and Elliot Harper. She's in Drammen now, giving a formal statement. She's coherent. Shaken, but coherent. Burge was quiet for 3 seconds. A long silence from a man who ran his department like a metronome. The ambassador's office has already called. Twice. Saying what? That the facility is a private document storage service leased by a commercial entity with no connection to any foreign government. That any materials found inside are the property of the leaseholder and should not be released to media. That the Republic's diplomatic rights must be respected. Nordahl watched a PST officer carry a flat archive box through the loading bay. Rain beaded on the cardboard surface. And the kidnapping? They haven't addressed it yet. I expect they'll try a misunderstanding angle. Voluntary meeting, translation confusion, cultural difference. She was locked in a room with no windows, a camp bed, and a bucket. I know. Get the statement airtight. I want Morgan's account documented, photographed, medically examined, and filed before anyone tries to reframe it. Nordahl hung up and walked toward her car. On the seat lay a printout of Maren Lunde's article, already dog-eared and annotated with her own questions. The story didn't mention a royal claim. It mentioned murder, kidnapping, stolen archives, forged evidence, coordinated media manipulation, foreign intelligence activity on Norwegian soil. That was the architecture Riley Hunt had built. Not a fairy tale, a criminal complaint backed by documents. Nordahl pulled out of the parking area and headed south toward Drammen. Tara Morgan sat in an interview room at Drammen police station with a wool blanket around her shoulders and a paper cup of hospital coffee she hadn't touched. A female officer stood by the door. A recording device blinked red on the table. She'd been talking for 2 hours. The detective across from her, a patient woman named Dahl, turned to a fresh page in her notebook. Let's go back to the moment they moved you from the vehicle. It was a grey van. No rear windows. 2 men in the back with me, 1 driving. They put a hood over my head outside the museum, outside the Munch Museum, on the east loading dock. I'd just gotten off the phone with Riley. I was walking to the tram. They came from behind, and one of them said something in a language I didn't understand. Then the hood. Can you identify the language? Russian, I think. I took a semester of it in university and I remember the cadence. I can't tell you what they said. How long was the drive? 20 minutes, maybe 25. They didn't drive fast. One of them held my wrist. Not hard. Professional. Like it was a task. And when you arrived? Down a ramp. Through a door. 2 flights of stairs. They removed the hood in the room. Camp bed, bucket, bottled water, packaged sandwiches. One of the men said, in English, "You are safe. You will not be harmed. Cooperate." Then they locked the door. How many times were you visited? 3 times a day. Food, water, bathroom escort. Nobody spoke to me except to give instructions. Once a man came in and photographed me holding a newspaper, the day's Aftenposten. He said, "Smile." I didn't smile. Did anyone threaten you directly? Tara pulled the blanket tighter. They didn't need to. I was locked underground in a room with no windows and no phone. The threat was the room. Were you told why you'd been taken? No, but I knew. I'm Riley Hunt's closest friend. They took me because she matters to them, and I matter to her. Dahl made a note. Did anyone mention Riley Hunt by name? The man with the camera. He said, "Your friend has something that belongs to important people. When it is returned, you will go home." That was the only explanation I received. And then? Then Riley opened the door. Tara's voice cracked for the first time. She pressed her fingers against the paper cup and breathed through her nose. She opened the door and she said my name, and Elliot was behind her, and they took me out through a tunnel and into a car, and I didn't stop shaking for 40 minutes. Dahl set down her pen. "Ms. Morgan, for the record, Do you believe your abduction was connected to the materials described in this morning's Aftenposten article? Yes. Do you believe foreign state actors were involved in your detention? Tara looked at the detective with the clear, exhausted eyes of someone who had spent 4 days in a locked room deciding what she believed. I believe someone with enormous resources kidnapped me off a street in Oslo to pressure my best friend into surrendering evidence that proves her family was hidden for 100 years. I believe they expected her to break, and I believe they miscalculated. The Russian embassy's third statement arrived at 2:17 p.m. through the embassy's official communications channel and was simultaneously posted on the ambassador's verified social media account. It read, in part, "The Embassy of the Russian Federation categorically rejects the unfounded and politically motivated allegations published in Norwegian media this morning. The facility referenced in these reports is a privately operated commercial archive leased by a Norwegian-registered business entity. The Russian Federation has no operational or administrative connection to this facility, its contents, or any individuals who may have accessed its premises. We note with concern the apparent reliance on unverified sources, anonymous documents, and individuals with known connections to extremist émigré organizations hostile to the Russian state. The embassy reserves its right to respond through appropriate diplomatic and legal channels." Maren Lunde read the statement on her phone in the Aftenposten newsroom and set it face down on her desk. "Third draft," she said to Sigrid Dahl, her deputy editor. "Each one longer than the last, each one more careful about what it doesn't deny." Sigrid leaned against the neighboring desk, arms crossed. "They haven't mentioned the kidnapping." "No." "They haven't mentioned Henrik Rask." "No." "They haven't mentioned DNA, the baptismal record, or File 17. Which tells you everything." Sigrid tilted her head. "Walk me through their problem." Maren stood and moved to the whiteboard where she'd mapped the story's structural logic. Colored markers traced the connections, red for violence, blue for documents, green for institutional responses, black for timeline. They can't deny the vault exists because PST is inside it right now. They can't deny the contents because we published photographs with metadata, corroborated by a Dutch forensic consortium. They can't deny the kidnapping because Tara Morgan is giving a statement in Drammen with medical documentation and physical evidence. She tapped the board. So they deny connection. The facility is commercial. The documents are private property. Any association with the Russian state is a fabrication by extremists. Can that hold? For maybe 48 hours. The lease agreement for the facility is registered to a Norwegian holding company, but the company's ultimate beneficial owner traces through 3 intermediaries to a Cyprus-registered trust. Anders Broch is already filing the beneficial ownership request. Once that chain is established, the commercial cover dissolves. Sigrid looked at the board for a long time. And the Romanov angle. I'm not leading with it. Riley Hunt was explicit about that. She's not claiming a throne, she's not asking for recognition. The story is about what was done to prevent her from knowing who she is. Murder, kidnapping, forgery, institutional manipulation, and foreign intelligence operations on Norwegian soil. The bloodline is context, the crime is the story. The international press won't be as disciplined. No, they won't. Half the wire services are already running headlines about hidden Romanov heirs. That's not something we can control, but our reporting stays anchored in the criminal evidence. Let other outlets chase the crown. We chase the cover-up. Her phone vibrated. A message from Anders Broch. Interview with Nordahl confirmed for 9 a.m. tomorrow. Both subjects will attend. Full disclosure authorized. Maren turned back to her screen. The article's comment section had passed 11,000 entries. The story had been translated into 14 languages. 3 television networks had requested interviews with Riley Hunt. Riley had declined all of them. Viktor Sokolov's video appeared online at 3:41 p.m., uploaded simultaneously to 4 platforms. He sat in a leather armchair in front of a bookcase heavy with Russian spines. His silver hair was swept back. His posture was precise, rehearsed, almost ecclesiastical. A small Orthodox icon hung on the wall behind him, positioned to appear in frame. "My friends," he began, his English accented but polished. "Today the world has learned what we have known for generations. The Romanov line did not end. It was hidden, concealed by those who feared the truth and persecuted by those who built their power on its suppression." He paused. Let the silence work. Riley Hunt and Elliot Harper, born Sophia Anna and Mikhail Henrik Nikolaisen, are the living descendants of Grand Duke Michael Alexandrovich. They carry in their blood the continuity of a dynasty that the Bolsheviks tried to destroy and the current regime in Moscow tries to erase. He lifted a document into the frame, a high-quality reproduction of the longer version of Michael's letter, the one with the additional paragraphs about dynastic destiny. In his own words, the Grand Duke recognized the importance of his line. He wrote, "The child carries within him the continuation of our house, and the duty of those who love Russia is to preserve this sacred trust until the nation is ready to receive it." Sokolov held the document steady, angled toward the camera. The empty chair at the table of witnesses was held for this moment. I call upon Riley Hunt and Elliot Harper to accept their place in history. Not as rulers, that is for the Russian people to decide, but as symbols of the truth that Russia deserves. The video ran for 11 minutes. Within 2 hours, it had been viewed 1.4 million times. Within 3 hours, it was destroyed. Maren Lunde published a supplementary article at 6:58 p.m. containing Riley Hunt's forensic analysis of the 2 versions of Michael's letter. The analysis was methodical, detailed, and devastating. Riley had identified 7 linguistic anachronisms in the additional paragraphs, words and constructions that did not appear in Russian correspondence until decades after Michael's death. She documented handwriting pressure patterns inconsistent between the original 7 lines and the appended text, using high-resolution scans obtained from the Orlova collection. She cross-referenced Michael's known correspondence, his documented political positions, and his explicit refusal to accept imperial authority without democratic assent in March 1917. The additional paragraphs contradicted everything Michael ever wrote or said about the throne. The article included a statement from Dr. Petra Lindqvist, a handwriting analysis specialist at Uppsala University, confirming the pressure and baseline discrepancies. A second statement came from Professor James Whitfield at the School of Slavonic Studies in London, who called the linguistic evidence conclusive, and the forged paragraphs a clumsy pastiche of monarchist rhetoric from the 1920s and 1930s imposed on an early 20th century document. The article's final paragraph quoted Riley directly. "Viktor Sokolov's letter is a forgery. It corrupts a genuine historical document to serve his political ambitions." The real Michael Alexandrovich never claimed destiny for his descendants. He deferred to the will of the Russian people. Sokolov does the opposite. He appoints himself the voice of history and uses fabricated evidence to conscript living people into a narrative they did not choose. That is not truth. That is exactly the kind of manipulation File 17 was meant to prevent. By midnight, Sokolov's video had been removed from 2 of the 4 platforms. The remaining copies accumulated comment sections that read like demolition sites. Monarchist forums that had celebrated the announcement 12 hours earlier turned hostile. The restorationists' credibility collapsed, not because Riley attacked monarchism, but because she proved Sokolov had lied about the one document he presented as sacred. The empty chair remained empty. Not because no one claimed it, but because the person it was built for refused to sit in it. Katerina Volkova arrived at Oslo police headquarters at 10:14 a.m. the following morning, escorted by Anders Brock. She walked slowly. The knife wound across her left forearm, stitched at the Orthodox parish house in Helsinki, and re-examined at a Norwegian hospital, was dressed in clean white bandaging, visible beneath her sleeve. She had not slept. Nordahl met her in interview room 3. A PST officer named Lars Engström sat in as observer. A digital recorder ran on the table. "For the record," Nordahl began, "you are Katerina Alexandrovna Volkova, born 1952, resident in Norway since 1984, former faculty member at the University of Oslo, retired. You are here voluntarily to provide a statement." "I am here to confess." Nordahl paused. Broch placed a hand flat on the table, a gentle warning to his client about legal precision. Katerina ignored him. "I am a member of Honest Russia. I have been a member since 1978. I held the keeper's seat at the table of witnesses from 1997 until this week. My responsibility was the protection of File 17 and the concealment of 2 children who are now adults, Riley Hunt and Elliot Harper." She placed her hands on the table, palms down. The bandage on her left arm was a white stripe against her weathered skin. "In 1999, the Northern Table of Honest Russia voted 3-2 to separate the twins born to Anna Nikolaisen and Henrik Voss. The stated reason was protection. Russian intelligence had identified their mother's research into Romanov genealogy. The vote was conducted in my apartment. I voted against separation. Henrik Rask voted against. We were overruled." "Who voted in favor?" "The identities of the other members are documented in my written statement, which Mr. Broch will provide. I will say now that the senior member who held the deciding vote believed separation was the only way to prevent both children from being identified simultaneously. He was not wrong about the tactical logic. He was wrong about everything else." "What happened to the biological parents?" Katerina's jaw tightened. A muscle worked beneath the thin skin of her temple. "Anna Nikolaisen and Henrik Voss were removed from their home by members of Honest Russia's Keeper faction before the separation was completed. They were told the children would be safer without them. I do not know whether Anna and Henrik are alive. I have not known for 26 years. That is the truth, and it is one of the reasons I am here." Nordahl leaned forward slightly. "What do you mean by removed?" "Relocated, given new identities, sent to a location I was never told. The keeper who arranged it is dead. Henrik Rask carried the details, and Henrik is dead. The file that documented their relocation was part of the custodian index, which was stolen and delivered to Russian intelligence through Pavel Orlov." "So you're telling me that the organization you belonged to took 2 children from their parents, separated the twins, placed them with different families, concealed their identities, maintained surveillance files on them for 27 years, and never told either child the truth?" "Yes." The room was very quiet. "We told ourselves it was protection," Katerina said. "We told ourselves we were the wall between them and the people who would use them. And we were, in some ways. But we were also the people who decided they should not know their own names, their own parents, each other." She looked at Nordahl. "I have spent 26 years believing I was on the right side of a difficult choice. I no longer believe that." "What changed?" "Henrik Rask died trying to undo what we had done, and 2 young people I helped hide proved they were stronger than the secret we built around them." Nordahl glanced at Engström, who gave a barely perceptible nod. PST was getting what it needed. "Ms. Volkova, can you describe the structure and operations of Honest Russia as it relates to Norwegian law?" Katerina straightened in her chair. "The next 4 hours would be methodical, exhaustive, and painful. She would name the factions, describe the funding channels, identify the safe houses, explain the coded filing systems, confirm Pavel Orlov's role as the conduit who sold the custodian index to Colonel Sergei Volkov of the FSB. Describe the forgery of Michael's letter by Viktor Sokolov's restorationist faction. Acknowledge that Honest Russia had operated inside Norway for decades without legal registration, transparency, or oversight. She would do all of this because Riley Hunt had told her, in the Helsinki apartment, that truth was not something you preserved in a vault. It was something you said out loud, even when it burned. Broch opened his briefcase and placed a 73-page written statement on the table. "My client is prepared to answer all questions," he said. "She asks only that the record reflect her cooperation was voluntary and her motive is accountability, not immunity." Nordahl picked up her pen. Maren Lunde conducted her own interview with Katarina 3 days later in a conference room at Broch's law office on Munkedamsveien. The recording was published in full on Aftenposten's digital platform alongside a 3,200-word feature that Maren wrote in a single sitting. The article was headlined, "The Organization That Hid 2 Children for 27 Years." It began, "Katarina Volkova is 72 years old. She has a knife wound on her left arm, a 73-page confession on file with Norwegian police, and a memory that stretches back to a Helsinki basement in 1978, where she first learned that the Romanov dynasty might not have ended in a cellar in Yekaterinburg. The article detailed honest Russia's founding, its century-long fragmentation, and the specific decisions that shaped Riley and Elliot's lives. It named the factions. It explained the table of witnesses. It described the empty chair and why it was built to remain vacant. It did not romanticize the organization. Katarina's own words, quoted at length, made that impossible. "We told ourselves every year that the moment would come when we could give them the truth. Every year we found a reason to wait. The political situation was too dangerous. The children were too young. The evidence was incomplete. The factions disagreed. Always a reason. Never the courage. Henrik Rask sent those envelopes because he had run out of reasons. He died for it. I should have done the same thing 10 years ago." The article's final section addressed the question readers were already asking. What happened to Anna Nicolaisen and Henrik Voss? Katarina's answer was printed without editorial commentary. "I do not know where they are. I do not know if they are alive." That information was held by Henrik Rask and by the Custodian Index, both of which are now in other hands. If Anna and Henrik are alive, they have spent 26 years separated from their children by people who claimed to love truth more than power. I was one of those people. The record should show that. Riley called her parents 4 days after the article published. Not from a burner phone, not from a borrowed apartment. From her own mobile, sitting on the floor of her Grünerløkka flat, which she had entered for the first time in 3 weeks using her own key. Marianne answered on the second ring. "Riley, I need to see you and Dad, both of you, tomorrow. Of course, we can come to, not here, not your house either. There's a hotel in Holmenkollen where we met before. The tea room, 11 o'clock. A pause. Riley could hear her mother breathing carefully, the way Marianne breathed when she was controlling something that wanted to spill. "We'll be there." Elliot made the same call 30 minutes later. Thomas answered. "Elliot, son." "Don't call me that right now." Silence on the line. Elliot pressed his forehead against the cool glass of his kitchen window and watched the Sajine rooftops darken under a grey sky. "I need to see you and Mum. Tomorrow at 11. The place near the ski museum." "We'll be there. Bring the box, everything that's in it. Whatever you held back last time, bring it this time." "There's nothing we held. Dad!" The word came out stripped of everything except exhaustion. "Please, just bring it." The Holmenkollen Hotel tea room looked exactly as it had 2 weeks earlier. Heavy curtains, silver pots, white linen napkins folded into rigid peaks. The weather through the windows was different. The rain had given way to the first hard frost of October, and the Oslo fjord in the distance looked like hammered steel. Riley arrived first. She chose a corner table with sight lines to both entrances and ordered black coffee she didn't intend to drink. Marianne and Eric Hunt entered together. They were dressed as they always dressed for situations that required composure. Marianne in a dove-grey coat, Eric in a dark suit. They looked older than Riley remembered. Not just 2 weeks older, years. They sat across from her. Nobody reached for a menu. "I've read everything," Riley said. "Katerina's statement, Henrik's notes, the adoption documents, the letters, Anna's letter." Marianne's chin dipped, a fractional nod. "I know you chose this. I know it wasn't thrust on you. Henrik Rask came to you and explained the situation, and you agreed to take a child whose identity had been sealed. You knew she had a brother. You knew the brother was being placed with a different family. You agreed to the separation." Eric's hands lay flat on the white linen. His wedding ring caught the low light. "We agreed to the terms because we believed— I know what you believed. You believed it was safer. You believed the threat was real. You believed silence would protect me. I'm not here to argue about what you believed." Marianne's eyes were bright. She held herself very still. "Then why are you here?" "Because I need to understand something, and I need to hear it from you. Not from a document, not from Katerina, from you." She looked at her mother. "When did you stop believing it was the right decision?" The question landed in the quiet room like a stone dropped into deep water. Marianne's composure held for 5 seconds. Then something behind it shifted. A structural failure, invisible but absolute, like a retaining wall giving way below the surface. "When you were 9, she said, "you came home from school and told me your friend Lisa had a twin brother. And you said you wished you had a twin, because then someone in the world would always understand you without you having to explain." Marianne's voice was steady but thin, balanced on a wire. "You went to your room and drew a picture of 2 children standing next to each other. You taped it to your wall. And I stood in the hallway outside your door and I knew." Eric shifted in his chair. "I knew later," he said, "when you started working in political risk, when you began analyzing how states conceal information. I watched you build a career on the exact skills that could one day unravel the thing I'd helped hide. And I thought, she's going to find out. Not because someone tells her, because she's exactly the kind of person who would see the pattern herself. But you didn't tell me. No. You had years. You had opportunities. I asked about my early childhood more than once. I asked about the sealed records. You did. And you deflected every time." Eric closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, the professional composure that had armored him for 30 years as a lawyer was gone. What remained underneath was a man who looked his age. "I deflected because I was afraid. Not of the conspiracy, not of Russian intelligence, of losing you, of watching you look at me the way you're looking at me now." Riley held his gaze. "I'm not going to tell you it's fine. It isn't. You taught me to value truth. Both of you. Every dinner table conversation, every argument about politics, every lecture about intellectual honesty. You built a person who would have understood the danger if you'd trusted me enough to explain it. But you chose to protect the lie instead. We chose to protect you. Those are not the same thing." The tea room's clock ticked. A waiter passed at the far end of the room and retreated. "I love you," Riley said. "That hasn't changed. It won't change. But I need you to understand that what you did, what you agreed to, cost me 27 years with my brother. 27 years of not knowing I had a family that someone took from me." Marianne wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. A quick private gesture, as if she resented the tears for arriving before she'd given them permission. "What do you need from us now?" "I need you to stop protecting me from the truth. Forever. No more locked drawers, no more sealed records, no more careful answers designed to deflect without technically lying. If I ask a question, I get the answer. The real one, even if it's ugly." Eric nodded. "And I need time. I need to be angry without you trying to explain it away or make it smaller. I need you to sit with the fact that you hurt me, and not turn it into a lesson about how complicated things were." "We can do that," Marianne said quietly. "Can you?" "We have to." Riley picked up the coffee cup, took a sip that had gone cold, and set it down. "I'll call you next week." She stood, buttoned her coat, and walked out of the tea room without looking back. Not because she didn't love them, because she needed them to see what it felt like to watch someone leave and not know when they'd return. Elliot's conversation was shorter. He met Ingrid and Thomas at a wooden table in the hotel's garden cafe, sheltered by a glass windbreak. The frost had whitened the grass beyond the terrace. Thomas carried a small metal box. Ingrid reached for Elliot's hand as she sat. He let her take it, held it for 3 seconds, then gently pulled away. "Open the box." Thomas placed it on the table and lifted the lid. Inside, a copy of Elliot's original birth certificate fragment, the photograph of Ingrid holding him as a baby, Henrik Rask's handwritten note, a key to a deposit box, and the warning: if he asks, tell him enough. If they come, tell him everything. Elliot removed each item and examined it. The photograph showed a younger Ingrid, her face soft and overwhelmed, holding an infant in a blue knitted blanket. The birth certificate fragment listed his birth name, Mikael Henrik Nikolaisen. "How old was I when you got this box?" 14 months, Thomas said. "And you kept it locked for 27 years. "We were told—" "I know what you were told. Rask told you. Honest Russia told you. The danger was real. The secret was necessary. The boy would be safer if he never knew." "Yes." Elliot turned the key over in his fingers. Small, brass, warm from being inside the box. "Did you ever think about telling me?" Ingrid pressed her lips together. Her eyes were red-rimmed but dry. "Every birthday," she said. "Every single birthday I thought, this is the year. He's old enough now. He's strong enough." And every year I decided he wasn't, because deciding he was meant everything would change. It changed anyway. "I know." Elliot placed the key on the table beside the box. "I'm not going to shout at you. I'm not built for that. But I need you to understand something. You raised me to be practical, to check exits, to prepare for things that might go wrong. You raised me for exactly this situation without ever telling me the situation existed. That's not protection. That's training a soldier for a war without telling him who the enemy is." Thomas's jaw worked. The big man looked reduced, compressed by something heavier than his frame was designed to carry. "You're right. I know I'm right. That's not the point. The point is what happens now. What do you need? Space, honesty, and time to figure out whether the people who lied to me for 27 years are the same people who loved me, or whether those are two different things I've been confusing." Ingrid's hand trembled on the table. "They're the same people," she said. "They were always the same people. That's what makes it so hard." Elliot looked at her for a long moment. Then he put the items back in the box, closed the lid, and slid it toward Thomas. "Keep it. I don't need the box anymore. I know what's in it." He stood, zipped his jacket, and walked out through the garden into the cold October morning. Behind him, Ingrid wept silently, while Thomas sat with his hands around a metal box that no longer contained a secret. The next 72 hours reshaped the landscape. PST's forensic team catalogued 411 individual documents recovered from the Norse Secure Solutions vault. The collection included File 17 materials spanning 4 countries and 8 decades, the original Porvoo baptismal record, the genuine 7-line letter from Grand Duke Michael, DNA reports, adoption records, surveillance logs, financial transfer records, and 3 handwritten notebooks belonging to Henrik Rask. The vault's lease trail was traced through the Cyprus-registered trust to a beneficial owner structure that terminated in a Moscow-based consulting firm. The firm's registered director had served as a cultural attaché at the Russian embassy in Oslo from 2014 to 2018. When journalists contacted the firm, its listed telephone number had been disconnected. The Russian embassy's fourth statement, issued through legal counsel rather than the ambassador's office, attempted to reframe the facility as a victim of unauthorized subletting. The argument required the embassy to deny knowledge of the vault, while simultaneously claiming the documents inside were private property that should be returned. The contradiction was noticed by every reporter who covered the story. In Moscow, Colonel Sergei Volkov sat in his office on the fourth floor of the FSB's Counterintelligence Directorate and read Maren Lunde's articles translated into Russian by his staff. The translations were annotated with operational assessments. Each annotation recommended a different countermeasure. None of the countermeasures addressed the central problem. The story was not about a royal claim. The story was about a cover-up. Every denial Volkov issued through intermediaries and diplomatic channels strengthened the question: if File 17 was fabricated, if the bloodline was false, if honest Russia was a fringe group of delusional monarchists, then why had so much effort been spent destroying the evidence? Why had Henrik Rask been killed? Why had Tara Morgan been kidnapped? Why had documents been stolen from churches and archives across 3 countries? Why had a fortified vault in an Oslo industrial district been filled with exactly the materials someone claimed did not exist? Volkov understood the arithmetic. He had built his career on controlling narratives, and he recognized when a narrative had escaped containment. The original plan, identify, isolate, discredit, erase, required the subjects to remain unknown, their story untold, their evidence scattered and unverifiable. Riley Hunt had inverted the structure. She had not claimed a throne. She had not sought publicity. She had documented a crime and given the documentation to a journalist who understood that the crown was context and the cover-up was the story. Volkov wrote a brief assessment for his superior. Operational exposure exceeds deniable threshold. Recommend withdrawal to observational posture. Further direct action will generate additional evidence against Russian state involvement. Subjects have been positioned as victims of foreign interference, not as claimants. This framing is more dangerous than the bloodline claim and cannot be countered through standard discrediting protocols. He sealed the assessment and placed it in his outbox. Then he opened a separate file and began reviewing the status of every intermediary, proxy, and asset connected to Operation Quiet Crown. 3 had already been recalled. 2 had gone silent. 1 was in Norwegian police custody. The operation was not over. But its active phase had ended. What remained was denial, damage control, and the patient work of waiting for the world's attention to move elsewhere. Volkov had done this before. He could wait. But he added a note to Riley Hunt's file that he had never written about a target before. Subject understands narrative architecture at a strategic level. Do not engage through information warfare. She will win. On the 6th day after publication, the story reached a temporary equilibrium. Norwegian police had arrested 2 employees of Norse Secure Solutions on charges related to Tara Morgan's unlawful detention. A 3rd arrest warrant had been issued for a Norwegian private security contractor linked to the surveillance teams that had followed Riley and Elliot through Oslo. Pavel Orlov had not been located. Viktor Sokolov had retreated into silence after the forgery exposure, his restorationist faction splintering between members who blamed him for overreach and members who blamed Riley for disloyalty. Father Alexei Morozov had returned to Pavo and was cooperating with Finnish police regarding the theft of the baptismal record. Katarina remained in Oslo, recovering from her wound and consulting daily with Brock on the legal framework for her cooperation. The international media had settled into 2 tracks. Serious outlets followed the criminal investigation and the political implications of foreign intelligence activity in Norway. Tabloids and entertainment platforms chased the Romanov angle. Hidden heirs, secret societies, royal bloodlines, Dynasty intrigue. Riley declined all interview requests. Elliot did the same. They had given Maren Lund exclusive access. Everything else was noise. Riley and Elliot met at the safe house one final time to collect their remaining belongings. The forest was deep in autumn. The birch trees along the access road had dropped most of their leaves, and the ground was a carpet of gold and brown that crunched under their boots. Frost edged the roof of the wooden house. The woodpile beside the door was half depleted from the nights they'd spent here planning the Porvoo trip, reading Henrik's documents, and arguing about what the truth was worth. Inside, the basement workbench still held the marks of their evidence sessions, tape residue, pen marks, a coffee ring. Katerina's document case was gone. The emergency bags were gone. The radio was unplugged. Riley picked up the photograph of the two infants. She'd left it here the night before they drove to Stockholm. The image was faded, the corners soft from handling. Two babies wrapped in a knitted blanket, their faces indistinct, their hands curled into small fists. On the back, in their mother's handwriting, SAN/MHN Oslo, 1999. She held it for a moment, then placed it in her jacket pocket. Elliot stood by the window, looking out at the trees. "I talked to Geir," he said. "Site's behind schedule. They need me back next week." "Are you going?" "I'm a construction engineer. Buildings don't build themselves while you're sorting out your dynasty." The ghost of something, not quite a smile, but its closest relative, crossed his face. "I talked to Sigrid Dahl," Riley said. "Eriksson and Lindgren want to discuss my reinstatement. Apparently being the subject of an international news story is a reputational risk until it becomes a reputational asset." "Are you going back?" "I don't know yet. I'm good at what I do, but I'm not sure the person who walks back into that office is the same person who walked out." Elliot turned from the window. "She's not." "No." They stood in the quiet house. Outside, a bird called twice and fell silent. "I keep thinking about what Katerina said," Elliot said. "That they separated us because two children created a pattern. Too visible, too easy to connect." "I remember. But the pattern was already there. It was always there. They just didn't want anyone to see it." Riley leaned against the workbench. "You know what I keep coming back to? Anna's letter, the one she wrote before they took her away. She said, 'Let them decide for themselves what the truth should mean.' She knew. She knew that someone would try to decide for us. And she wrote those words so that one day we'd read them and understand we had the right to refuse. Do you think she's alive?" The question hung between them. Neither tried to answer it. Neither pretended to know. "I think if she is," Riley said, "she would have seen the articles by now. And I think she would have recognized us." Elliot nodded. "There's something I need to say." He moved away from the window and faced her. "When I got the envelope at the construction site, I almost threw it away. It was raining. I was behind schedule. I had a foundation problem to solve. A letter from a stranger with no explanation felt like something I didn't have time for. But you went. I went. And I found you standing in a corridor with a dead man 30 meters away, holding the same letter I had, and you looked at me like I was either a threat or an answer, and I couldn't tell which." "Both," Riley said. "You were both. The point is, I went because I was trained to assess risk. That's what I thought I was doing, walking into a controlled unknown to evaluate the danger. But that's not why I stayed." "Why did you stay?" He was quiet for a moment. Through the window, the forest shifted in a gust of wind, and the last birch leaves spun down like small gold coins. "Because when we stood in that corridor and compared our letters, I recognized something. Not your face, not your voice. Something underneath all of that. A way of standing, a way of looking at a problem. Like the world had built the same architecture twice and put it in two different buildings." Riley's throat tightened. We're not what they wanted us to be, Elliot said. Not the Keepers, not the Restorationists, not Volkov, not our parents. We're not symbols or assets or evidence or instruments. We're not the empty chair. No. We're brother and sister. That's what was taken from us. Not a throne, not a dynasty. 27 years of knowing each other. Riley pulled the photograph from her pocket and looked at it again. 2 infants, a blanket, their mother's handwriting. I can't get those years back, she said. No. But I'm keeping the ones that come next. She held the photograph out to him. He took it, studied it, and handed it back. You hold on to that. Why? Because you're the one who reads documents. I'm the one who checks exits, division of labor. This time the smile reached his eyes. And hers. Riley put the photograph back in her pocket. Elliot closed the window and checked the lock. Habit, reflex, the muscle memory of someone who had spent his whole life securing the spaces around him without knowing the real reason why. They walked out of the safe house together. The door shut behind them. Neither locked it. The road through the forest was narrow, unpaved, lined with birch and pine. October light came through the canopy in long shafts that shifted as they walked. Riley pulled out her phone and typed a message to Tara. Coming home. Coffee tomorrow? Tara's reply came in 11 seconds. Already ordered, your usual. Don't be late. Elliot's phone buzzed. A message from Gear. Steel delivery confirmed for Monday. Get your boots on. He showed the screen to Riley. The world keeps going. It does. They reached the Volvo parked where they'd left it 6 days earlier. Elliot got behind the wheel. Riley took the passenger seat. Between them, on the center console, sat the photograph and a folded map of Oslo that was no longer needed for escape routes. Elliot started the engine. Oslo? Oslo. He pulled onto the road. The forest fell away behind them. The highway south carried them towards the city where they had been born together. Separated, renamed, hidden, hunted, and found. Neither of them was Sophia anymore. Neither was Mikhail. Neither was a symbol, an heir, or a chair at someone else's table. They were Riley and Elliot, brother and sister, going home.
The story continues in the next chapter, so make sure to subscribe, leave a comment with your thoughts, and share this video with fellow book lovers.